Hello, and welcome to today's online panel discussion on the topic of technological advancements and supply chain needs in endoscopy. My name is Mark Elliott. I'm the COO of Europa Science, which is the publisher of Electro-Optics. We are going to spend the next hour or so exploring trends such as high definition imaging and fluorescence endoscopy, and look at how enhancing diagnostic capabilities can pose challenges to manufacturing of optical components. We know, of course, the demand for superior resolution and sensitivity necessitates advanced lenses and best-in-class optical coatings, which is complicating manufacturing and increasing costs, which, of course, nobody ideally wants. So how do we square that? This online panel discussion will explore how the endoscopy industry is evolving to meet these challenges and how suppliers are enabling the next generation of high-performance, reliable, and sustainable components. Our two panelists will examine innovations in materials science, strategies for scaling production, the collaborations needed to maintain global competitiveness, and of course, how to choose the right supplier. So let me welcome them. First of all, we have Raytu Keller, who is a business development manager for Materion Bowsers Optics. He has more than a decade of experience in the optics industry, spanning from fiber optics to optical coating and packaging. He has worked in product development and product management, and including a 2-year assignment as head of R&D in Shanghai in China. He has been at the forefront of optical technology innovation, driving advancements, of course, in life science, telecom, and optics for consumer electronics. Many would describe him as a driving force behind Materion Bowsers Optics endoscopy portfolio, with its high-performance optical coatings, components, and prism assemblies serving the needs of the major endoscope manufacturers. Thanks too to Materion Bowsers Optics for partnering with us on this project today. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Next, we have Simon Peter McCall, who is a research fellow at the University of Glasgow and also CTO of Microendo. He started his undergraduate in medicine with a minor in mathematics at the University of Otago in New Zealand before transferring to the University of Auckland, where he graduated from biomedical engineering with honours. He completed his PhD in 2019 at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology in Japan, studying the use of optical fibers in neurological imaging, mode multiplexing, and compressive sensing, and addressing cold atoms trapped around nanofibers. Simon started his postdoctoral work at the University of Glasgow in Scotland in 2020 with a focus on low light imaging, holography, and imaging techniques through multi-mode fiber, specifically 3D time of flight imaging. In 2023, he was awarded an early career fellowship from the Leverhulme Trust to work on flexible multi-mode fiber endoscopes. And after development of several prototypes, he founded a company, Microendo, in June 2025, where, as I said, he sits as the CTO. So a big welcome to him, and obviously a welcome to you both. Just before we start formally, a little bit of housekeeping, if I may. For anybody watching this live, these online panel discussions are designed to be useful and interactive. So we would, of course, welcome any questions from you too. So please submit them at the bottom of your screens, and we'll do our best to tackle them across what I hope will be a full and lively discussion. Right, that's the bit where we kind of warm everybody up. My job now is to kind of pose some questions to our panelists and get the conversation going. So we're going to start with quite a general question, which I guess kind of probably vexes everybody watching this. I'd ask you to kind of define for us what currently are the biggest supply chain demands facing the endoscopy space. And I'll start with you, Raytu, if I may.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark, for the introduction and for having me on here. So that probably doesn't come too much as a surprise. We have heard about it numerous times in the media recently, and I also get that confirmed by speaking to our customers, which are basically the endoscope manufacturers, most of the well-known brands among them. And I would say the most main concern that we hear nowadays are really supply chain security issues. So the supply of critical components for medical endoscope has been and still can sometimes be a headache to the endoscopy industry. First, we were hit by COVID pandemic. Then there are a number of military conflicts around the globe affecting how trade is conducted. And now the global economy faces major uncertainties linked to trade disputes and changing policies of nation states toward previously widely accepted multilateral agreements and institutions. And we have to be aware that the supply chain involved until final assembly of an endoscope is often case very, very fragmented. Many highly precise parts are being manufactured by quite a large number of suppliers and even their sub-suppliers. In some cases, suppliers specialize on a single processing step, on an endoscopy lens, for example, before they ship it out for further downstream processing until the part is finally ready for final assembly into an endoscope. In that regard, I'm glad that Weird Material Optics pulsars are very well positioned and can cover many relevant aspects in manufacturing of precision optical components for rigid endoscopes. And we draw the strengths from our global manufacturing footprint that also allows us to source internally with our different production facilities in North America, Europe, and Asia. So we can source the parts where it makes most sense from the cost structure and volumes that we are looking at. And at the same time, we keep investing in strong local production competence where it really matters and makes a difference that endoscopy customers of ours get the critical parts they're looking for from us.
Okay, thank you. Simon, I mean, just to, obviously, I'm sure you're going to echo a lot of what Reto has said there around the challenges. Do you think it's better than it was a few years ago, or are we kind of just swapping one problem set, COVID, for example, and all the issues that caused for a different set of perhaps more geopolitical issues?
Yeah, I think maybe a bit of the latter, actually. So things did definitely slow down with COVID a bit. And then now that there are geopolitical issues around the world, it sort of seems like, you sort of what's the expression, out of the fire and into the
Yeah,
frying
out of the
pan or
frying
something.
pan into the fire. Yeah.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire, exactly. So so there almost always will be bottlenecks, and I think probably the best way to deal with this is to have certain redundancies in, as Reto was saying, if you have local manufacturers and a broad network of people who do the things that you need, that you can rely on, that won't be restricted for whatever IP reasons that you might come across, then that would be quite helpful. Now, in my particular case, because we're very young, as you mentioned in the introduction, we've
Yeah.
just started a company which is still in the process of looking for funding, trying to get the product that we're developing in from a research perspective off the ground. That research perspective actually means that we're a little bit protected from these supply chain issues, because a lot of what you get are, well, they're very small volumes. They could be quite custom made. You could go find somebody who will do it for you a certain way, and you don't have to worry too much yet about, okay, how is this going to affect my IP later on when I put it into a product, and where am I going to be selling this onto? So in that respect, and I think I wanted to maybe bring this up because it's a bit different from what Reto was saying. In the more burgeoning startup world, that you have a little bit of protection, which is a small respite given all the other problems that you come
Yeah.
across. Trying to get a product out
Funding and
there on the
things. Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think that's probably what I'd add onto it.
Yeah, I mean it's a really interesting thing. I mean, supply chain challenges are not unique to this sector, of course, and there doesn't seem to be a precise correlation between size of company and therefore the ability to, I suppose, second guess problems or to find alternative solutions, and then the need to produce at scale relative to the amount of time they spend trying to kind of de-risk that area. It seems to me often the biggest companies can be the most vulnerable, and the smaller to medium companies, which you'd think would never get round to worrying about those sorts of things because they're too busy doing the actual building, would are really good at it. So it's a really complex issue, I think, for everybody to contextualize, but also on the ground to deal with. But we recognize it's there. And I guess, hopefully 5, 10 years from now, we will do one of these conversations and there won't be these issues that are so omnipresent because I think, it does seem to have been one thing after another, and frying pan and fire is a very good way
Right. Yeah.
of putting it. Obviously, all of those demands are based on application need, I guess, and there's an obvious point to ask, which is how endoscopy applications and use cases have evolved, and that the sort of scaling of that as an area. I'll stick with you if I may, Simon, and then we'll go to Rita on that one as well. Thanks.
Sure. So the way I've seen it is there are a few. They seem to evolve largely based on need, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more as the webinar continues. But the area that I'm very interested in and that I've been looking at, so I've been kind of keeping my finger on the pulse for, is how do we get very small? And as time has gone on, I mean, you start with the Hopkins endoscopes, which are remarkable tools, and they have miniaturized as well. And then you say, okay, well, maybe I want flexible endoscopes to reach difficult areas, and you get something that's similar to maybe a camera on a stick. And they say, well, okay, if we're going to miniaturize this, then how can we, shrink them and go further? And there have been strong developments in that area where, it's really quite remarkable what people can do. With foundries and silicon photonics. And similarly, the fiber bundles that people have been working on that could see things that are that tiny, and they all have their own downsides, so to speak. But I have seen things that maybe 5, 10 years ago weren't so common just to end up more and more on the market. The other place I've seen a bit of development in is especially when it comes to doing something that like fiber bundle imaging, where your resolution is restricted. And as you mentioned in the introduction, if we can have better resolution, better image quality, this kind of thing, that would be always a benefit. I don't think anybody would say no to this. Is actually in the compute side of things. So it's saying, well, if I have this much information that I'm getting from my multi-core fiber, how can I then increase the data throughput, or how can I reconstruct my images such that what I'm looking at, and it does depend on your application, especially in a medical setting, whether you want to be looking at cells or you want to be looking at, sort of a far field picture more. And so those types of developments I've seen come up more and more, and things that were previously, I mean, even from the time when I started my PhD till now, what I saw back then is nearly impossible, at least with the off-the-shelf technology that you could find, suddenly start getting better and better, and we start closing in on all of the once unexplored niches. And it's not just to solve problems as much as it is also creating fields which weren't possible before. So people are interested in now investigating this because they have the tools to do that. So I think those areas, at least from my perspective, are areas where I've seen a lot of development.
Yeah. And how's this playing out, Rita, on your kind of order book side of things? You kind of agree with all of that?
I mean, definitely interesting aspects, the miniaturization side that Simon mentioned for the coating supplier or optics supplier for the endoscopes. Further miniaturization certainly is a challenge to handle smaller and smaller parts. We are serving a variety of different applications. I have seen in some other applications lens sizes go down to the size of 50 micron. That is not yet what is being used in endoscopes, but these are certainly directions that we're also thinking how to deal with even smaller optical parts. On top of that, what I'm personally fascinated, and you asked for use cases, I mean, we're the suppliers to the endoscopy manufacturers and maybe a bit further away from the end users, and maybe don't always get the latest trends. But what I'm personally impressed by is the advancements in robotic surgery and how basically precision of procedures can be improved and overall give a better outcome for the patient with shorter recovery times and maybe less risks of inflammations or such things. So that is some use case that I'm personally impressed and also following in with what we do.
Yeah. And in terms of sort of the pace of this innovation and development, I mean, would you both characterize it as fairly constant, or has there been a sort of a noticeable sense of that pace increasing over recent years? Rita, do you want to answer, have a go?
Yeah, that might, again, personal experience and maybe also comparison to other markets we're in. I would still characterize endoscopy and medical application as relatively conservative. There are long cycles for approvals of new medical devices. And yeah, I think the product improvements and iteration are somehow subject to those certification approvals and I would say there are some other industries in consumer particular where you see much higher speed, and I would characterize medical industry and in particular endoscopy much more conservative. That doesn't mean that we are seeing that like AI enhanced diagnostic is being looked into, and we see novel innovations taking hold even in also in medical and endoscopy space, even though I would not consider it the fastest paced market due to the nature of need for long qualifications.
Yeah. I mean, the regulatory framework, of course, is an inhibitor, I guess, to some of that pace for very good reason. Simon, do you think that kind of is consistent, or has in that context, e.g., it's slow compared to other things? Do you think it's still quite a steady, or has there been a slight uptick in the amount of innovation that you're seeing or working with?
Yeah, so I feel over the maybe past decade that I've seen it's been pretty consistent. Every time you think of maybe a new application or an aspect that endoscopy hasn't really quite targeted yet, it sort of you give it a little bit of time, and then you find out that okay, you know, the space is slowly being covered. But as Reto was saying, it does fall into the traps of, you know, well, there's a lot of regulation, and I think, as you said, rightly so. You know, you don't want to end up with something where, say, the front half of your endoscope falls off inside somebody's body, and maybe okay, not to that extent, but there is need for medical regulation. I think I would agree with that. There are other places endoscopes could be used in non-destructive and industrial testing, but I think the constraints on the tools that they have there aren't as stringent. So the fancy cool things that you want to do, say fluorescence or diagnostics, or, you know, cell resolution or optical biopsies, these kind of things that really sort of drive the innovation, happen to be in the medical space. So that's where you have reason to go target those markets, but then you are held back with more regulation there than you would be if, say, you wanted to see the inside of a car engine, where, you know, your average 6mm camera at the end of a rod will probably do fine. So I think that's probably why, yeah, the growth is conservative, but it's not there. I mean, it's you see it's steadily ticking upwards, and I think it's moving at a reasonable pace.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. You know, it's one of these things where I think, you know, I always look for kind of, I suppose, headlines around what's going on, and I think, you know, you've covered those point, both of you, well, in terms of, you know, giving a flavour of what's going on and what sort of the market is evolving along at. Obviously, you know, the diagnostic capabilities of these technologies is understood. You know, we understood at least what they're trying to do. How in particular are optical techniques driving that? Is it about reaching, you know, hard to reach places, or is it about I suppose the, you know, consistency of the imaging? You know, what is it that the optical techniques are doing that are really enhancing diagnostic capabilities? Rachel, I'll go back to you on that one, if I may.
Yeah, I think enhancing capabilities include, I mean, there are several areas of improvements. I think one side is increase in resolution of the imaging, and other aspects are enhanced diagnostic capabilities, for example, with the use of fluorescence endoscopy. It is used basically to make specific tissues or abnormalities such as tumors better visible by exploiting the unique fluorescence properties. Usually it uses some fluorescence agents like endocyanin green that emits light when exposed to specific wavelengths. And this technique often uses those contrast agents to really visualize what the physician needs to see. And that is also a field that Materion Balzers Optics is very strong at, also from the field of microplate readers. We routinely design and manufacture image quality grade bandpass filters, the short, long pass or notch filters, or beam splitters that are used in such fluorescence setup and other medical imaging technologies. Maybe other features are narrowband imaging, where you can color some tissues and then also in the imaging channel basically apply a filter and only look at much more narrowband wavelengths to enhance visibility of the same tissue that was colored previously. And I think these are techniques which will bring endoscopy forward.
Simon, same sort of question, but I wondered whether there was anything in particular that you thought was less well understood about the capability of this sort of technology in terms of those diagnostic outcomes. Is there something that people don't routinely think this can do that they should?
Well, look, if you let me dream, Mark, then
Dream away.
then I'll come up with all sorts of wild optical techniques, which generally because the large majority of my professional career has been in academia, it tends to be I've seen a lot that's still in the research realm that is yet to make it out. And I think there are some techniques there where, I mean, if you can probe things with photons and you look at sort of every aspect of the photons that are coming back, there's almost an endless treasure trove of information that you could get out about the tissues that you're looking at. The fluorescence is the I guess the obvious go-to answer, and generally, yeah, that is done with contrast agents. But you could also do so. There's endogenous autofluorescence, usually on elastin, or you might look at second harmonic generation in collagen and look at some fibrosis in some tissues that way, which would be quite cool. And I think that's that could already be in use, but some of the stuff which maybe I'll bring up, which is less common, I think, outside of the world of experimental work, are techniques that maybe use, well, okay, second harmonic generation is a nonlinear process, but that use nonlinear scattering, like Raman, to determine the thing that you're looking at, or hyperspectral techniques, which kind of harkens back a bit to what Reto said about looking at narrow bands. So you illuminate with a lot of light and then you look at narrow bands. It's like, well, you could do that and actually look at all your bands back and pass that through a grating that will show you lots about the tissues that you're looking at. I think two final optical techniques that I'm kind of interested in, and maybe I'll give an application for one of these, is polarimetry, and then another way, which is something that I've been messing around a bit with, is sort of this 3.5 or 2.5D imaging. So the polarimetry I know for solid tumors, specifically in the brain, that form the structure of the tumor tends to be a bit different from healthy tissue. And this will have an effect on the polarization of light that you're sending into the brain. So rotate it a certain way. It won't scatter it exactly like healthy tissue would. And if you were to look at how that the polarization of the light that you're putting in is affected, then you can determine what's healthy tissue and what's cancerous tissue quite finely. So you'll be able to make very, very specific cuts, because it's a place where maybe you don't want to take out too much if you're taking a solid tumor out of the brain. So that's one technique, and the other with 3D imaging, I think is a very I know there are optical techniques on the market at the moment. I know some of the Olympus endoscopes use stereoscopy to be able to get a profile of the thing that they're looking at, and this seems to be quite indispensable, at least to the surgeons that I've spoken to. It really gives them a sense of where they're cutting and stitching inside the body. So those optical techniques, I think, are well, the 3D one, at least, I think, could be quite important, especially if you want to move into the realm of something like robotic surgery, where you want to be very certain about where you are in the patient.
I
And
would have a question also on that to Simon, if you permit.
Yes, of course.
I find it very interesting, the 3D imaging. That is, in fact, something I think that is not so widely used in endoscopy. I know some use stereoscopy. Since we're also in other applications, for example, intraoral scanners uses 3D imaging techniques, often with either pattern projection, active stereo vision, or time of flight. Do you see any of those technologies in a pole position for being adopted in endoscopy?
So I have, and I might be a bit mean to myself here. I have some skepticism about time of flight, simply because the distance ranges that you want to see when you're doing medical endoscopy tend to be, and that's the technique that I had personally used before this multimode fiber imaging. The distance ranges that you want to see tend to be on the very, very short side for time of flight, a bit long for interference. So it's a bit strange to think of something as being a bit too medium, but the imaging that you care about in the body tends to be a bit too medium. From what I understood about the stitching inside, so you're doing laparoscopic surgery on a machine like a Da Vinci. This being able to tell where you are when I mean, it's not fully robotic in the sense that I'm not handing it to a robot. It's still human controlled, but it's operated by a robot behind me somewhere, and I'm looking through this screen. When I did talk to a couple of surgeons who were in gastroenterology and gynecology, they said it's actually, to have that stereoscopic vision is very, very useful. And from what I understood then, is the endoscope that they were using was it wasn't pattern projection, it was stereoscopy, and it behaved a lot like how your eyes would. So it's almost like you're taking the doctor, shrinking them down, and putting them inside the body to do what they want. So at the moment, it has its problems, because I mean you can, in the same way that I could trick you with an optical illusion, I could trick a stereoscopic system with an optical illusion. So you're not necessarily entirely certain where you are. The other thing that you're not sure of, which time of flight has on stereoscopy, is that if I put a white sheet in front of your endoscope, I could tell you exactly how far you are with time of flight. And if I want to give the drill or the suture machine to a robot, then they want to know exactly how far away they are. But with stereoscopy, I can only give you the shape. I can't tell you the true distance. But I think for current practical purposes, and I know it's not commonly used, but when from the people I spoke to who had used it, they said it made life a lot easier. It felt a lot more natural to kind of look at things in 3D. I think stereoscopy is where it's at. The other issue with it is that you kind of have to have some separation between your cameras. So it means that, we were talking about miniaturization before, and yeah, the Olympus one that I brought up, for example, that's I think a centimeter in diameter, which for a lot of keyhole surgery is fine. For other things, I mean, you could imagine a situation where that won't really fly so much.
It's really interesting, this, isn't it? Because it sort of speaks to the future, really. And, when you say the words trick, that doesn't sit very well with regulatory framework, particularly around life sciences and medical applications and things. But it is inevitably a kind of trial and error exercise, isn't it? To kind of get a critical mass of understanding to kind of live with whatever issues are. It's really interesting, but it's a neat segue as well, because I wanted to ask a bit about this kind of journey, which is obviously really about the kind of scaling out of an R&D stage of endoscopy applications. We understand the regulatory framework is challenging, but rightly so. I'm wondering if there's anything you can talk about. Maybe I'll stick with you, Simon, if I may, on this to start with, that you see as commonly arising as a problem area in terms of that journey. Where is this going wrong, or where is it being slowed down? Perhaps is probably a better way of framing it. In terms of how these technologies emerge from that R&D stage.
Yeah, so I think if I could give an unfortunately quite generic answer to this, I think anything that's transitioning out of the research world and into the real world, so to speak, has to pass through this valley of death, and that's really where you find yourself sort of struggling for funding, where you don't quite have something that is, I mean, you have a proof of concept, you have a prototype, you don't have something that's sellable, and you have to convince somebody to take a chance on you in some way. In the medical world, although I think the upsides are a lot bigger and the market is a lot bigger,
Yeah.
there is a good reason to move in that direction. But it does get harder because, one of the first questions that you're going to get in that situation is like, who do you have on board with you who understands the regulatory space and who's going to be doing this, and how are you going to fund this type of thing for such a new and a niche thing? And so I think maybe a good way to do it, and actually the way we were hoping to do it with Microendo, is to sort of find a foothold in applications that are outside of the medical applications, where you don't have to suffer as much of the regulatory problems, and we could kind of still transition this valley of death with
Yeah.
all its difficulties, and then tackle the regulation afterwards. So it's like we're time multiplexing our problems, so to speak. But so I think that's probably a sensible way to do it. But as I said before, often, the thing that drives the innovation are the cool and interesting things, and the impactful things that you might see in the medical space. So to then find something where you say, okay, well, this is going to have a use in non-destructive or industrial inspection, and also move into this direction eventually is somewhat difficult. So it's sort of a fine line to walk, a fine balance to try balance.
And Rachel, from your perspective, I mean, are you seeing this on the ground, and where does, in terms of the commercialization of that? So say it's crossed the valley of death, and it's into some sort of more secure footing, that scaling up and scaling out opportunity, where is that going wrong, or are there good examples of where people are getting this right?
Yeah, I think in order to establish new innovations in a production environment, I think it's crucial to prepare supply chain and onboard them early on, and make them aware of your needs. Otherwise, you might bump into a situation that you don't find a supplier capable of meeting what you designed for. So that is something that I can anyhow advise to most companies, to onboard your suppliers early on. Have your preferred supplier where you also share roadmaps and where you plan to go, and then hopefully you have a committed partner there which is willing to go that road, make necessary investments in capabilities and capacities. And yeah, I think it is crucial to make sure that you're not coming with technologies where there is no ecosystem where you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fairly common issue, I think, across a lot of technology areas, where getting the conversation active at the right time, once you've found the right partner, is the absolutely critical takeaway on this. I want to talk then about the production side of things. So we've crossed all of those issues, and we've got a kind of good partner, and we've got a good technology, and it's going to fly. Then there is the issue about the high volume production, and that obviously can sometimes compromise quality and reliability. Manufacturers are looking to avoid that. So what tips can you give to people trying to avoid the problems of quality control in that kind of high volume environment? Rachel, I'll stay with you if I may on that one.
Yeah, I think it's mostly the same answer. Involve your supplier in an early stage, product development and quality planning. Work with suppliers that have appropriate quality management systems in place and are familiar with qualification requirements for medical devices. And often, for reliability, there are tests which need to be conducted, long-term environment reliability tests, and you don't want to discover at the end of the project that you don't have those test results, and make sure that you start your testing early on, or use well-tested, well-established solutions that can be adopted much quicker.
Yep. And I think, as you said earlier, getting those tests in at the right point in that production journey is also critical. Simon, anything to add on that point? I appreciate that you're not really in that high volume game at the moment, but anything you feel you've seen in terms of some of the work you've been doing in terms of building this capability and technology?
Not too much to add. If anything, thanks, Reto. I was taking notes about getting your suppliers involved early on, because that is I could see why that would be really good advice, especially when you're transitioning new technologies into the real world. I think I mean, yeah, it's mostly all been said from my perspective, and as I say here I'm being a bit speculative because I'm not in the high volume space so much, but one of the things that we have been speaking about, and Reto's already mentioned it, is making sure that everything is tested to the best of what we could think it could be. I think that what's a bit difficult with new technology is that there are sort of standard tests that you expect of your device, and there are standard tests that you need for your regulatory bodies. But if you have something that behaves or that works on maybe a new process, or not a new process as such, or maybe a new system, so there's a new technique that you're using here, that one you might have to come up with your own sort of a way of saying, well, how do I know that this one is up to standard and this one isn't up to standard? So for example, if you're saying I'm going to do this 3D time of flight through a multimode fiber, then I want to be sure that it works under condition XYZ. And if you are involved with your supplier, you have to make sure that every new piece that's made is working under condition XYZ. Some of which will be new, which are specific to the technique that you're using, I think. So that's the area where, I mean, I guess it's more of a valley of death kind of region. Well, technically in that position you'll be in production, so you'll be a little bit out of valley of death,
Yeah.
but it's something that you have to think about in the valley of death for the hill on the other side.
Yeah. No, I understand. I've got a question. I mean, you've talked a lot about choosing the right supplier, so I want to come back to that. But I want to just jump into a question that's come in about basically optical processes and the boosting of resolution. Are there any kind of specific bits of advice you can give to allow people to boost the resolution of imaging applications for endoscopy, particularly around the processes? Are there any takeaways you can share? Happy to stay with you, Simon, or Rita. I don't know who would like to pick that one up first. Yep,
Sure,
Simon.
I could go if
Yep.
Rita's all right with it. So I think in the face of a suggestion that I offered earlier, which was to go smaller and to get into harder to reach places, it's really, if you're fighting a fundamental limit of physics, which is that a greater aperture and a higher NA will give you a finer resolution, then that is probably the first thing you want to check, is that you're not trying to break physics in some way.
Yeah.
And then once you're certain about that, and you want nicer resolution images, there are optical techniques which, if you can do some type of active imaging, will let you increase your resolution a bit. So for example, it would be one of those things which would also not be terribly harsh on the sample. I mean, there are other super resolution techniques that for living biological samples might be a bit phototoxic. The other thing that I probably wanted to touch on a little bit there was in the case that you're using something like a fiber bundle, or even if you're just using a lens tube like in a Hopkins endoscope, what you might be interested in doing is doing some form of compressive sensing or microscanning. So often the amount of information in the object that you're looking at is far less than the amount of information that you're picking up when you're recording every pixel in your camera. And if you imagine that you have your fiber bundle and it's moving just a little bit around the area that you're interested in looking at, collecting a series of images and then putting that through a process that could deconvolve a higher resolution image from that microscanning, that would be quite important, especially in the fiber bundle case if you're looking at things like cells, which I know some companies are interested in doing, and in fact to do things like that. But then that really comes back to well, how much compute am I adding to the near side of my endoscope? So the optical system behaves as it's supposed to, and then I'm trying to collect all of that data and getting out as much information as I could from that. Now there is a temptation to say, well, add AI to it, and AI is pretty good, but there is also a danger in AI that it can hallucinate some things that aren't necessarily there, which is I think fine in situations where you're making videos or pictures for entertainment purposes, but in situations where you're trying to do diagnostics, maybe that could be quite dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. We got 40 minutes, everybody, through without anybody mentioning the word AI or the phrase AI, which
Oh,
is
I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we all know where
Yeah.
it messes up in terms of some of the things that we're all using it for sometimes. But in reality, data, has to be kind of absolutely pure. And I love "Don't break physics." That's one I shall take away. Ray, too. Anything from you on that? I mean, that was a really good answer, but there are obviously some tips and tricks. Over to you.
And I like Simon's response going in the direction of super resolution and going towards diffraction limit. I was thinking in a much more obvious dimension. I was thinking, yeah, you can increase the resolution of your image sensor. Today it's driven by, or state of the art, I think mostly is by now 4K image sensors, and in some cases already HK ultra high definition are commercially available. From the perspective of a precision optics manufacturer, this means definitely more stringent cosmetic requirement specifications for the raw substrates and surface treatments, such as polishing and optical coating. Fewer and smaller defects are permitted on all the optics. While at the same time inspection of the defects becomes much more challenging. At some point, human eye inspection is not longer feasible, and you need to look into other solution. So in summary, in order to boost the resolution for imaging applications, the optics suppliers are required to continuously invest in appropriate clean room environments, inspection equipment, and capabilities to keep up with these evolving needs of the market.
Yeah, it's it's a complex thing, and I guess the reality is that there isn't necessarily a universal takeaway with any of it really. There's a lot of common sense and a lot of kind of digging into the detail. Okay,
Could I,
yeah, sorry,
if I may, because
yeah,
I
of
had a
course.
question on that topic for Reto actually, about the optical manufacturing. From what I've seen, and I'd love for you to let me know your opinions about this. As things get, because that is a very good point, that there are aberrations, and as things get smaller, as they do with endoscopy, I mean, you're not dealing with your 1-inch lenses, then those aberrations sort of seem to have a bigger effect. It's you have to be very, very close to the shape that you want.
Mhm.
And you mentioned before that you've even seen lenses go as small as 50 micrometers, which is just a remarkable thing. And I wondered if the effects of these optical aberrations, are they worse in the situations where you're really getting very miniature, or is it to a similar standard that you see in the slightly larger endoscopes?
Okay, then I have to maybe take away the question and would need to come back to you later. I don't do optical designs myself and couldn't comment on that. I apologize.
Oh no,
That's
fair.
fair.
I thought if you knew, then that would have been great to know,
That's fair.
but I don't either.
That's fine. But include me in the answer, and when
Yeah.
we get round to doing the article about this, we'll add that into the article for anybody that's also intrigued by the answer to that question. But it is a good one. Right, we've talked a bit about suppliers, and in terms of choosing the right one. So the question is obvious, I guess. How do you make the right choice? Are there? I mean, we all know the obvious things. Get on with them. Believe they've got a sustainable business model, all the rest of it. But are there any kind of more specific technology or contextual kind of things to look out for when you're choosing the right partner? I don't know who would like to go first with there. So, I mean, I'm guessing, Simon, you must be kind of at the sharp end of some of this a little bit at the moment in terms of working with different people.
Yeah, so a little bit. Yeah, actually, sometimes having a choice, I feel, is a lucky situation to be in.
Okay.
In the sense that some of the things that we do, so largely, say through the uh, really tiny hair thin endoscope that we have, um, that one largely works. It's a multi-mode fiber, and it largely works on the principles that you do some holography, inject a mode mix with some coefficient such that you can do active imaging, you do point scanning at the other end. Now that's all possible because there are lots of things that will let you do that holography, but actually we've come to a point where it's really just one company that is the one that gives us the capabilities to do exactly what we need to do, because we have to, it's mainly about speed. And so in that situation, you don't really get much of a choice. And I know there are competitors on the market who aren't quite as capable, but there is something that's up and coming. And so in those situations, yeah, you're a bit hamstrung if your technology is very reliant on that part. But in other situations, I think predominantly what we're looking at the moment is capabilities rather than optimizing for cost. And once we have that down, I think, ideally you'd want to optimize everything at the same time. You'd want to know that you have sustainable, supply model with this, or
Yep.
economic model with this supplier. And you'd want to know that could be scaled going forward. But at the more researchy development end of things, it's really like, what can we do and how far can we push it?
Yep.
And once you've pushed it as far as you can, you start going back and asking the same questions that you had before. It's like, well, now can we do this with cheaper components? Can we do it with,
Yep.
smaller things where we do have a very good relationship with our suppliers? And so we're kind of halfway between doing this for some of the parts.
Yep.
And for other parts, as I said, in our spatial light modulators, we're at the moment stuck with one who've been great so far. So nothing's gone wrong yet. But
Okay,
yeah,
fingers crossed there.
yeah, that's true.
And Rita, so you obviously are partnering a lot of people. What do you kind of say would be the things that people need to look out for here?
I think Simon got it spot on quite some of the points. Definitely, he mentioned speed as an important factor, and I would really also emphasize that. And there, you do make a difference by selecting the right partner. I myself, or we at Materion, look at the business model for component manufacture for endoscopy really as a business that requires a broad set of skill and a high degree of flexibility for a number of highly specialized manufacturing steps. Endoscopy, we look at it as a low volume, high mix business. There's very little standardization in the product portfolio. So looking at every possible product that someone needs requires a lot of capabilities from the supplier. And in case of Materion, we have been supplier to the endoscopy industry for more than 35 years. And in this time, have amassed an immense know-how related to requirements for endoscopy optics. And just to give you an example, today we are familiar with more than 400 different types of glasses for which we have existing coating designs and cleaning processes. If you start with a supplier who's maybe not familiar with those, you lose already time with feasibility studies on how to treat this glass to get it clean for the next step. So working with experienced and well-established supplier gives you a head start over for our customer during new product introduction, because you can basically benefit from an extensive pool of know-how that we have amassed over more than 35 years by now. Yeah.
And in terms of the mix of what your business is, it, you know, what proportion is sort of off the shelf stuff and what proportion is customized? Is it 50-50 or 80-20? What's the rough mix?
That's a bit difficult to say after. I think we need to be differentiate. So we do a lot of job coatings also for endoscopy customers, and we can basically apply same standard coatings on a variety of different glasses and lens types with different indexes and still meet specifications. So we make an attempt on our side to standardize things wherever possible, and by working with the same customers over many years, it also allows you to establish certain workmanship standards between you and your customer, really, and providing guidelines how to approach the next design, to already use the learnings that were made previously, and you don't fall in the same pitfalls anymore. And that overall helps you certainly with time to market, bringing new product into production.
Yeah, I guess that's right, isn't it? You know, a kind of backlog of kind of previous iterations is a good place to start if you're trying to kind of implement something. And nobody has mentioned China, which is interesting because sometimes, you know, China becomes the omnipresent discussion point on when we're talking about kind of supplier choice and what you should or perhaps shouldn't do. But anyway, thank you for not mentioning China again, because that is a good point, but I'm sure it's a factor. Okay, this is my favorite question of the whole run. We always kind of try and wrap up with something on this sort of frame, which is the crystal ball question. You know, what do we see coming down the line? We've talked a lot about miniaturization, so that's an obvious one, you know, but perhaps that's the only one. I don't know. So this is your opportunity to give me some more tips about what is coming down the road from these, you know, for optical endoscopy innovations. Rita, I'll stick with you if I may. What will we be talking about in a few years' time?
Yeah, I think it's topics that we mentioned mostly during discussion already, with some advanced diagnostic capabilities that are possible with advanced imaging technologies. But I think in summary, it's everything that basically enhances image quality, improves procedural precision, and prioritize patient safety and comfort in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Simon, anything to add to that?
Sure. We did talk a lot about miniaturization, and that's kind of a place that I was quite interested in. Where we've had interest actually has been, you know, doing these really tiny bronchoscopes to see how far down the lungs you could get. So you know, it's that's one place which is quite cool. But again, if I can dream and I can add any optical you know, technique to the mix, then I think there would be a lot that I could add. I don't know exactly where. It's hard to you know, predict the future, but something a more general field that, whether it does develop or it doesn't, but something that I'd like to see develop is a lot in the way of active imaging. And the reason that I think active imaging will be quite so you know, you send out light in the way that you might want to do fluorescence. There's already capabilities to do this, and as Reto was saying, you know, definitely has capabilities with dichroics and filters to you know, do this, looking at stained tissues and label-free tissues as well, and that already gives you a lot about diseases. And I mentioned polarimetry before, and some of the 3D would also be active imaging, whether it's patterned illumination or time of flight. But the reason that I say that would be quite good is because it not only does it extend the diagnostic capabilities, it could also potentially, and this is maybe further down the line, extend therapeutic capabilities. So where if you want to do some type of actuation with light, cutting or suturing or tissue welding or something like that, if you have the infrastructure in place for that, and you let the myriad inventive and clever people of the world play around with it for long enough, then I'm sure it won't be long before somebody comes up with a very clever way to use it for therapeutic capabilities as well. So that's me dreaming, though. So
okay. No, we love the
see.
dreaming.
Yeah.
So, the good thing about this is, we record these, we can come back to them, and we can, hopefully in a few years hence, come back to this topic and see what we got right.
Brilliant.
So we'll hold you to both to do that. Okay. Well, look, unfortunately, we have run out of time. So we are kind of coming to the close of today's session. This online panel discussion will remain accessible on the Electro-Optics website. That's electro-opticsnospace.com. And it will eventually turn up on our YouTube channel. We will create an online article about what we've talked about today. So please do spread the word among your colleagues if you've enjoyed this discussion and found it useful. And yeah, let's talk about that question that we couldn't answer there and then, because let's incorporate that. So look, all that remains for me to do is to thank our two speakers and the Europa Science production team working away hard in the background. Thanks again to Materian Bowser's Optics for helping us stage this today. And a thank you to everyone out there who's taken the time to watch this online panel discussion. Time is limited, we're all really busy, and it's great to get impact and input, and obviously, for you two giving your time to watch this. Please keep an eye out. We've got some more sessions coming up. And look, thank you all both, particularly for your time today. It's really enjoyed that. It's really interesting. And thank you for everyone who's watching this either live or on demand in the future. Thanks again. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.